Good morning. So happy to be with you guys this morning. So let's meditate. Take your attention inside, down to the solar plexus, below the solar plexus, into the belly button chakra, below the belly button. Breathe into that space. And what we're trying to do here is embody our physical body before we go into meditation, so that we're connected throughout the physical and the spiritual at the same time. Because the goal is to live in both at the same time, to really embody our practice. And the reason we do it with closed eyes is so that we can fully concentrate in the arena where we have spent the least time. So we bring our entire focus and attention into the inner world in meditation. So breathe into the chakra below the belly button. And you can say inside the Om sound. And feel that vibration. Just hold it in your deepest part of your belly. And then you can make the sound, either a humming sound or Om, in the low part of your voice. Om. And feel that vibration. And now feel for that vibration in the space in between the breaths. And feel what it feels like to release yourself into that space. It's almost like we create a vacuum so that our mind drops into that space. You know, we now know theoretically that there is a brain in our gut. But as a culture, we don't know it experientially yet. When you're ready, allow your attention to move up to your heart center. And the sound is ah. Ah. I mean, you can use your middle voice. And again, breathe into that space and feel for the space in between the breaths. And allow your attention to fall into that. Feel into your heart center and allow it to soften. And feel for that frequency again. And just notice, understanding always that contraction is the flip side of expansion, and expansion is the flip side of contraction. And there's no need to be in judgment about either one. And when you're ready, gently move to your third eye. And the sound always has an upwardly rising feeling to it. And it can be either hum, H-U-M, or hung, H-U-N-G, depending on what tradition. But it really, it's almost like the sound you make when you're kids with wax paper on a comb. And feel that center becoming more and more available. And as the thoughts arise, see if you can relax your brain and just let the thought go by instead of contracting around it. Yes, that feels so much better. Just let it pass. And let your mind relax. Whatever we need to think about will still be there when meditation is done. And now let's practice the rising sound of Om Ahum together. We'll just do it 3 times, and you don't have to do the pitches I do. Whatever works for you is fine. Om. 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 as you're ready, holding your attention inside. Gently allow your eyes to open. Who may we serve this morning? We're so happy to be here with you. Mm-hmm.
There's an inner work, there's sort of two parts. One is simply connecting to source. The other one is appeasing or bringing into balance negative energies, or other difficult energies, or energies that we need to learn from. And could you speak to the balance between those two aspects of practice?
Okay, the question is this, that in inner work there seem to be two sides to it. One is connecting to source energy, and the other is dealing with our own negativity. Is that how you would?
Yeah, or the negativity coming towards us.
Or the negativity coming towards us. Yeah, wherever we experience negativity in our lives, that these two sides seem to need to coexist in our inner work. And ultimately, of course, spiritual realization involves a unification of all of this so that we are both present to source energy and experiencing in real time the diversity of our outer life as we are connected to the source energy itself. Did that answer the question?
Well, just sort of restated what I stated. I guess I was asking about the balance between those two things.
Okay, the balance between those two things. That's the real question. So, this speaks directly to the experience of duality, the inner and the outer being separate, the experience of inner and outer being separate. And so we use the word contrast rather than separate. And very often we perceive or we assume that what's on the inside is imperceptible to others, and that only our outside speech and action is available to the outer world. As we have more and more experience in life, we begin to recognize that most of our inner experience is telegraphed to the world as it's happening in real time. And so that what we perceive as a private space inside ourselves is actually more like a fishbowl to others. And so, in a way, that unity already exists in the diversity. And as we mature, we become more perceptive about it. So that wasn't really the question. The question is the balance between our attention on source and our attention on diversity. The diversity being the contrast that we experience. And the reason we teach, we sort of spoke to it already in this meditation, that the reason we teach meditation with closed eyes is because it's the less frequent of where we tend to put our attention in our lives. And so it's the less developed part of us. And we're going to shift gears here a bit. and not to talk so much about inner and outer, but about the attention on love, peace, joy, gratitude versus the unresolved disharmony within us, which maybe speaks more clearly to the question you're asking.
So then the question about that is then, if you're so say one is perceives oneself as being attacked, whether it's an internal or an external thing. So you're saying, oh no, just go to peace, love, and harmony. Is that bypass, or is that actually digesting, or whatever we're supposed to do with that other negative?
The question is yes. If we bypass that energy, we don't face it and understand, but it's not really a mental thing. So here's what it is. This is the contrast that we experience within ourselves when negativity arises. And that contrast is a very important part of our evolution, because that contrast shows us the disharmony within us, regardless of whether we interpret it as victimhood or some other kind of frustration or some other negativity, anger, betrayal. We'll just leave it at those two for now. And what we notice with human beings is that they tend to experience thematic negativity, especially over time. One can notice that. And so when you notice yourself feeling anger as a theme, or betrayal as a theme, or as though you're being punished as a theme. I mean, there are all kinds of poses that humans take in these negative energies that seem to be thematic. We start to identify ourselves as these patterns. Then these things become obstructions. We experience them as blocks in our spiritual evolution. So the real question is how do we address the blocks. And of course, the answer is always love. And yet, that is bypass. If you dissolve into love without actually digesting the feeling, and how does one digest the feeling? The first thing is allowing yourself to feel it, allowing it to completely come. And very often we do a practice of calling in Archangel Michael. And actually, Archangel Michael carries a lot of purple light. And the purple light can dissolve, can completely cut through that negativity. And over time of repeated practice, we get more and more competent at dissolving, giving away this negativity into that feeling of relief when it is released, which in some practice they call an upward shift. Now, is that bypass? It depends on how we use it. If we actually face the energies and grow above them so that our experience of them, how do we say this? The way it dissolves is it's a spiral. You know, we do one layer of it, and then it seems to come back, and we do another layer of it, and then it comes back, and we do another layer of it, and it comes back. And we can understand these patterns as the ones that have magnetized us. They're karmic patterns that have magnetized us into this life for us to overcome. And we train ourselves to choose differently. And as we become more and more accomplished at that, the patterns themselves begin to dissolve. So in the beginning, it is like bypass because we can't exactly dissolve it ourselves. And so we give it over. And then as we get more and more experience, we can dissolve it ourselves and we get faster and faster at it. And what happens is that as we get better at it, we are actually, we're shoveling out the crap And the deeper we get, the more intense it gets. And so as that intensity grows with our experience, it feels like we're standing still and just shoveling, because it doesn't ever get less, it gets more. And believe it or not, that is a huge sign of progress. Because evolution, when we are held by obstructed, we'll use the word obstructed, by certain thematic patterns, we can't stay in an evolved state. And we get to a place where we're like, oh, that again. And we just shovel, we pick up the shovel and we do it. And we just keep doing it. And there are tools along the way, therapy can be one of them. And of course, mantra can be used as bypass if we're burying the feeling with mantra, saying our mantra over it. But also, dissolving with the breath. Is a tool that we can use until we can experience it deeper. And okay, I'm really asking about how to digest. Oh. So there is this understanding, these patterns, because what happens is we digest our own, and then we start to digest everything around us. And we come to understand that these contrasting patterns will always be in and around us. And that our job is not to, first of all, there's 3 levels: thought, word, and deed. And, we're all pretty good at deeds. We get better at thoughts. We get better at words. Thoughts are the deeper. And what we're really trying to do is cultivate our access to that which is beyond all of it. These patterns they will always be here. But our relationship to them changes over time as we evolve internally. They no longer drive first of all, our behavior, then our words, and eventually our thoughts. And, you know, the whole school of Advaita is you just go there and live in the center because these are always going to be there. At the same time, it's important that we change ourselves so that we spend less and less time in these patterns and more time with Source, knowing ourselves as Source. But there's no one who doesn't go back and forth. And it's very, very humbling to understand ourselves deeper and deeper as we explore these patterns. And it's that humility that allows us to keep going. At the same time, we don't want to be those patterns. So the key word that you actually used in the question is balance.
Balance.
Balance. We have to keep our balance, and that's learned experience. But understanding, key to understanding is that there is always more. And that's true in every dimension of infinity. And we understand that certain energies block us from having the capacity to experience other energies. And so we are doing this all the time as we are evolving. And evolution is a continuous process. And one of the things that gets us into trouble is the idea that there's a linear goal. That, you know, someday we're going to experience nothing but happiness. That idea leads to a lot of disappointment. And this is the reason for the word equanimity. It's understanding that all of it exists in the same time, and that all of it exists in us, and at different times, different parts of it are magnetized. And we do our best to really digest, understand, and transform that which obstructs us. And as we attempt to do that more and more, our humility grows and our capacity for compassion for others grows, because we discover how difficult transformation, self-transformation is. And so there is this universal tendency to bypass that which is negative difficult in our inner work. And get out of balance. And the thing that saves us is a dedication to truth and coming back to source. And what we notice over and over is that when people, there's a stage where people have some achievement, but the arrogance becomes overwhelming. So that's a kind of out of balance too. And, it's easy for us to see it in others, but we can always assume that it's there in ourselves. So this balance, truly treating those we love with love, being vigilant to that. And treating ourselves with compassion is a huge, huge part for all of us, is being blind to the lack of compassion in our relationship to ourselves. I mean, it's not a simple question what you asked, Andrew. It's one of the most complex. This balance is one of the most complex things we deal with. But it is very important to understand that such a thing as spiritual bypass exists, where we have the experience of dissolving an emotion and it keeps coming back. And is that bypass or is that dissolving? And we learn over time. But an increase in intensity it is a clear indication that something different has happened. Go ahead.
Well, the 15th of the, if there's a external thing, somebody attacks you, then the issue is not denying that, but maybe dealing with one's reaction to it And also it's accepting the fact that, you know, your karma is part and parcel of contrast, which you're supposed to be grateful for, even though it's not.
Well, I don't know about being grateful for the manifestation of that which is delivered karmically. But one thing that you and I have noticed about karma is that when a karmic experience appears, how big an impact it has a lot to do with choices in recent history, in this life. For example, do you mind if I say it? So something karmic can happen, but have very little impact because it is from a past life situation that you have already dealt with. That can happen. And so the karma looks like something big and it just floats by. Not without it's minimal impact. Other times things happen, you know, there are things astrologically that for example, a person can suddenly run into a bunch of expenses, and that can be a complete astrological event, unexpected expenses. And so, you know, you could say that's karma, but and if you know that that's about to come, then you can put money away beforehand. But that's a level of understanding that takes a lot of practice and experience to have. But these things can be seen astrologically. You know, I keep coming back to trying to answer the question between the question of balance between dissolving patterns, digesting patterns, and dissolving patterns. Still looking for that answer. And, you know, the tendency when we acknowledge that there's always more, in terms of there's always more evolution possible, and in terms of, you know, these patterns are there, there's a tendency to say, well, I'm going to quit while I'm behind. Because what's the use? And, you know, that abdicates responsibility for the quality of our inner life. And so we'll say again, it's about balance, and that all of us who have been working for some years have noticed that the bottom and the, you know, there has been evolution. That the level of joy that one experiences is much different from the level of joy that maybe was experienced 5 years ago. That the capacity for actually loving the people we say we love has grown. That the capacity for being compassionate to ourselves in moments that we would normally consider as failure, allowing ourselves to be human and being compassionate to ourselves with a softness about how we, nothing is accomplished without, learning can't happen without what we perceive as failure. And so we are constantly building a better life inside of ourselves. And so that's our barometer, is our capacity to release ourselves into that which is real and unchanging. As we find our balance and that which is unreal and ever changing. And what I, Rebecca, am going to say in this moment is that I don't fully understand this conversation, the answer to this question, and it will be a question I continue to ask the guides over time, and hopefully come back with more and more and deeper understanding over time. This is not yet something I have clarity in myself about, and am not able to access it for whatever reason this morning. They're just showering me with love, and all of you, of course, too. So, so there's there's just this pure, potent love, and that's always the answer. They're also saying linear mind. Linear mind. It's trying to understand ultimate reality from linear mind. And we've said over and over again, it doesn't go into English, doesn't go into any human language. These are dimensional, and it sounds like a cop-out, similar to the idea of bypass, but it's not. You know, we're talking about a different dimension of reality, so it's a completely different dimension of experience that one is able to access when in complete contact with source energy. When in contact, we won't say complete contact, we'll say in contact with source energy. And that linear mind cannot function in that reality. Black and white no longer exists in the same way. There is only beingness in every direction. And all parts are welcome. And there is no obstruction in ultimate reality. There is nothing obstructing anything, there is only flow. And the mind just disappears in ultimate reality because it's not of that level. It's not of that. The mind cannot find the edge to encompass ultimate reality and describe it. Hmm. Any more questions? Andrew?
Although there wasn't an answer, it's actually helpful what you're saying. And I that connecting to source, you're also connecting to acceptance of what is right now. Devoid of that past or future, really just what is right now. In which case, in that sense, there's not a problem. But it doesn't mean that you don't, welcome the lion into your house or whatever. There's a way in which you self-preserve, which is linear, and but that can go on independently of the others. In other words, both can simultaneously exist. I'm at peace with that.
And balance. You said the answer in the question. So Andrew's saying that the conversation has been really helpful, even though there's no particular answer, and that it's sort of how we started, that grounding yourself in highest best, which is the linkage to that release. It's very hard to drop into ultimate reality from any state that doesn't have connection to highest best for the whole. Let's say that's the easiest way to allow ourselves access. So I think we're ready to go into meditation, if that sounds right to everybody. Thank you so much. This has been a wonderful time, because it's when there's not yet resolution, this is the edge of a cusp of learning. That is very exciting. So this is all good. Thank you so much. Let's meditate. Thank you guys so much for coming today. It's really been such a pleasure to be with you. So much love.